Have you ever gotten advice from somebody that was in no way, shape, or form qualified to give you that advice? That's because good advice comes from insider knowledge, and that's what we're going to do today. I am going to give you insider tips on what it's like to move to Minnesota as a Minnesota native. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Lola. I'm your favorite realtor with your favorite collective here in the Twin Cities. I upload new content every week about what it's like to live here in the Twin Cities and how to find the right lifestyle and community that fits you. The first thing we're going to talk about is the different seasons that Minnesota has. Minnesota technically does have all 4 seasons, although you may hear that we have winter and then we have construction season, which may or may not be true, but we'll talk about that later. So let's start with talking about winter. Winter usually starts right around Halloween, and it may be a hit or miss whether or not you experience snow during that time, but temperatures do start to drop once we kind of hit the end of September and early October. Winter can usually last up until about April, but I wouldn't be surprised if you end up seeing snowfall in May. Not super common, but again, be prepared. Our winters can get pretty cold, with the prime being January and February, where our lowest temperature average is about -20 degrees. Once we start to see that more consistent snowfall, you want to go out and get snow tires for your car, or at the very least all-season tires. It's going to give you better traction when you're driving in the snow and a lot less anxiety. In the winter, a lot of Minnesotans like to enjoy activities such as snowboarding, skiing, ice fishing. St. Paul will usually have a winter carnival, and if we're lucky with cold enough temperatures, we'll get ice castles. So even though the cold does suck, yes, I would advise you to fully embrace the winter and figure out what activities might suit you best. Otherwise, it's going to be a really sad winter for you. Now, spring, if we're talking about the true definition of spring, honestly, I would say we get maybe about half a month, maybe a month of spring, and that's usually the month of May. And the reason I say that is because April is still typically a little cold, and most of the times in my experience, we're still going to see that snow melt. Once we get to the end of May, where we get Memorial Day weekend, that is where summer really kicks off for us. Memorial Day weekend is when all the lakes open, splash pads, pools, water parks, all of your outdoor activities that are typically done in the warmer season, that will happen right as we hit our summers. And our summers can get pretty hot and humid here, with most days being in the 80s and potentially in the low 90s. But it's not very often that we hit triple digits. Summer lasts from Memorial Day weekend until Labor Day weekend. The day after Labor Day is when school starts and what I consider our fall. Our falls here are so beautiful. If you get the opportunity to visit the North Shore, you will never see a more beautiful fall. Fall is another one of our shortest seasons, in my opinion, because once the snow comes, to me, that's winter. So fall for most people is from when the kids go to school until the snow comes. Insider info point number 2. Let's talk about traffic. So traffic isn't usually as bad as in bigger cities like LA or Chicago, but rush hour in the Twin Cities can still be frustrating. Rush hour here is considered between the hours of 3 and 6. However, is usually going to be the busiest between 4 and about 5. Before or after that, it's not too terrible. If you're commuting within the Twin Cities, especially during the winter, this is when those snow tires are going to come in, and you're going to want to be very conscious about how you're driving and read up on those defensive driving skills. If you need public transportation outside of the Twin Cities can get very difficult and almost non-existent. There is a light rail system that connects St. Paul, Minneapolis, and the airport, and buses that do cover most of the Twin Cities and that metro area. Tip number 3 is Minnesota nice. Minnesota nice is real, but it can feel passive aggressive. The people here are very nice and very polite, but they may not welcome you into their social circles right away, so have some patience and really find activities that you enjoy doing and go out into the community and do those things to make sure that you're finding the right people to throw into your tribe. Minnesotans are very reserved at first about their friendships, but once you get to know them and really build a relationship, you can expect that loyalty for life. Politically, I would say that Minnesota is pretty diverse, with the actual Twin Cities metro being more liberal and the outskirts being a little bit more conservative. And related but not related, the Twin Cities metro is a hugely diverse area, but once you start to get out of that metro area, it becomes a little less diverse. There is a super strong Scandinavian and German influence here, as well as Somali and Hmong populations. So that means there are a lot of diverse food experiences, and honestly, I think the food scene in Minneapolis is underrated, and so many different cultural experiences that you can immerse yourself in. Now, let's talk about the cost of living. The cost of living here isn't as expensive as one of the coast states like California, New York, but it's also not one of the cheapest states. The median home price for the Twin Cities area like St. Paul and Minneapolis is $350,000, while some of the further and smaller cities like Duluth and Mankato and Rochester, those areas usually range about $250,000 to $300,000. We do have a higher income tax rate and sales tax rate, so if you're moving for a higher paying salary, you want to make sure that your salary offsets the taxes. And honestly, I think those taxes go to amazing things: our schools, our government funding, our healthcare. So it balances things out just a little bit. We actually don't have any taxes on our groceries and our clothing, so that might help you if you're nervous about the taxes also. Outdoor recreation here is a huge deal. We have over 11,000 lakes for you to explore, whether you like to fish, kayak, canoe, swim, whatever sports you can do in the water. We also have great hiking and biking trails, and I mean miles and miles of trails. There are even trails within neighborhoods. We have the Boundary Waters, which is great for you true nature lovers that want to completely unplug from the world, and so many parks and playgrounds available for the kiddos. Let's talk about the job market. So Minnesota has, in my opinion, and statistically, one of the best economies in the entire US. We also have an incredibly low unemployment rate, which means we have tons of opportunities available. Some of our major employers include United Health Group, Mayo Clinic, Target, Best Buy, 3M, and I mean they're headquartered here, not just that we have Targets. We also have a lot of opportunities for remote work, which is something that's just getting bigger and bigger. Speaking of rankings, Minnesota also consistently ranks at the top for public education. Our best school districts are Edina, Minnetonka, Wayzata, and Eden Prairie, and we have the University of Minnesota, which is the top ranked research institution. We have Carleton and McAllister colleges, which are ranked as the top liberal arts schools. Now, we talked a little bit about the food scene earlier, but let's go back to it for a second, because like I said, I think that the food scene is completely underrated here. Until you try all of these, I feel like you do not get your true Minnesotan badge. First is the Juicy Lucy. This is essentially just a cheeseburger with the cheese melted inside of the patty. Then we have walleye. Walleye is actually one of my favorite fish to eat because it has less of that fish taste. Most of the time you're gonna find walleye fried here. The next is a hot dish. Hot dish is just another fancy word for casserole. You may have heard of the tater tot casserole or tater tot hot dish. That's one of my personal favorites. We also have a huge craft beer scene with breweries like Surly and Summit Brewing Co. This next one hurts my heart after the loss that the Vikings had in the playoffs, but let's talk about sports culture. So Minnesotan sports fans are very loyal, to say at the least. We have the Minnesota Vikings for the NFL. We have the Minnesota Twins for baseball. We have the Minnesota Timberwolves for basketball, Minnesota Wild for hockey. So just like any state where anybody's from, most Minnesotan fans are going to be incredibly loyal to their teams, no matter how many ups and downs those teams may give us. But unlike some fans in some other places, not all of us will completely hate you if you root for another team. So Minnesota has a lot to offer: great job opportunities, great schools, amazing outdoor recreation, and overall it's just a really friendly community. But it also does come with those high taxes, extreme winters, and I think that's it. So if you're considering moving to Minnesota, I want to hear what your biggest concerns are. Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so again, you don't miss any updates.